More than 300,000 of these rifles were manufactured here.
This was the first time since the Charleville musket that the U.S. Army had adopted a foreign weapon for their military service.
Well, if I remember correctly, this was the rifle used by the U.S. Army regulars in the Spanish-American War, wasn't it?
That's right, and in the Philippine insurrection and the Box Rebellion. But that brings to mind another great weapon that revolutionized the Army's weapons system.
In July of 1898, a new close support weapon was used against the Spanish at Santiago, Cuba. The Gatling gun, invented by a doctor of medicine, James Gatling, gave the American troops superior firepower. For many years, this forerunner of the modern machine gun was deployed only as an artillery piece. It was an Army captain, Dan Parker, who devised a way to use it as a close support of infantry. His theories were proven at Santiago and later adopted by European tacticians in the trenches of World War I. During this same period, while our troops were engaged in the Philippine insurrection, they requested a rapid-firing handgun of heavy caliber in order to stop the human wave charges of the Moros. The fierce Filipino warriors would dope themselves up and charge in a frenzied fury.
Our troops needed a large bullet like this to keep the enemy from reaching them. This is the automatic pistol that was developed by John M. Browning.
Like the earlier Colt revolver, this is a design which has stood the test of time. Since 1911, the Browning pistol has been the U.S. Army basic sidearm.
So that brings us back to the beginning of this century, Tom. What happened here at Springfield then?
I'll show you. Well, Russ, the age between 1900 and 1936 was a great age of experimentation at the Springfield Armory. This is one of the fine weapons they developed in this period. 1903 bolt-action rifle. Has a rear leaf sight here, standard Army weapon for many years. It would be safe to say that this rifle was one of the most accurate long-range shoulder arms ever devised. Hitting targets at 1,000 yards was well within the capability of this rifle. During World War I, Sergeant Alvin York received the Medal of Honor for his exploits with the Springfield rifle. He was an expert sniper. He also captured over 100 of the enemy single-handed, merely by threatening them with his Springfield.
Yes, I remember this rifle very well.
Here's a converted rifle that very few people have ever seen. The standard rifle was altered to fit the needs in the front-line trenches of World War I. In that type of warfare, it was unsafe to stick your head over the parapet of the trench because some expert shot might pick you off. The rifle was converted to lower the butt portion of the stock and fitted with a periscope. A remote trigger control permitted the soldier to fire without having to put his head up in line with the sights. It was never an Army issue, but the soldiers who converted it used it with good effect. World War I is one of the most brutal wars of all time. The trench knives were used by our soldiers in that war. But this was also a time when automatic weapons were being perfected. Look at these. This is the Lewis machine gun. It was developed by Colonel Isaac Lewis, a U.S. Army colonel.
It was first used as a troop support weapon, but because of its light weight, it was quickly adopted by the Allied air arms. This is the machine gun credited with shooting down the great German Zeppelins over England. However, because of this rotary drum magazine, its firepower was limited. The Browning machine gun, perfected by the same man who gave us the automatic pistol, was water-cooled, relatively light in weight, and its 30 caliber bullets were fed to the firing mechanism by long ammunition belts. More than any other weapon, the machine gun gave rise to armored warfare. Of course, Russell, the Germans were not to be outdone. This is the machine gun they used both in the air and on the ground. It was developed by an American, Hiram Maxim. In the mid-1930s, the world-famous M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle was developed here at the Springfield Armory by one of our engineers, John Garand. His invention was given to the United States government as a gesture of Mr. Garand's great love of country, and he never received any royalties, nor payment of any kind. His superb design gave this nation one of our best individual weapons. During World War II, our soldiers fought their way through Europe and the Pacific with this weapon. General George S. Patton claimed the M1 Garand was the finest weapon ever used by the American Army. Between 1940 and 1945, the Springfield Armory produced more than 4 million of these rifles, thus surpassing the total output of arms for all the years between 1795 and 1940. And that wasn't all. U.S. Army troops carried the M1 right into the Korean conflict. General Douglas MacArthur said the M1 even outperformed the wonderful model 1903 Springfield, not only for its rate of fire, but for accuracy and rugged dependability.
Here's something.
It seems that the period from 1936 to 1957 was a very eventful 21 years in the science of weaponry. What with semi-automatic rifles and all.
Yes, a lot of new weapons appeared during those years, and these are some good examples.
The bazooka, a rocket launcher, was a revolutionary development and was introduced in Tunisia early in World War II. For the first time, the infantry had a shoulder weapon designed to penetrate tank armor. The recoilless rifle here, developed late in World War II, fired artillery shells, and yet was light enough to be hand-carried. This is the 50 caliber Browning. It was often used to shoot down enemy planes while they were making low-level strafing attacks upon ground troops.
I know the 50 caliber machine guns are being used by the Army today. So that brings us up to the present era of weapon development, doesn't it?
Yes, Russ. Between 1957 and the present time, the automatic arm has reached a high state of perfection. The Springfield Armory played a key role in this development. Soon after the fighting ended in Korea, the M14 automatic rifle became the standard Army shoulder arm, replacing the M1 Garand. It was capable of firing 750 rounds per minute and weighed approximately 9 pounds. When our troops first went to Vietnam, this is the weapon they carried. For real hand-carried firepower, however, nothing can equal the rugged M60 machine gun. It is relatively easy to carry, has a high rate of fire, and uses ammunition in a range of weights for good penetration of heavy brush and undergrowth. It is one of the Army's most useful weapons. In the airborne operations in Vietnam, it serves as a prime item of armament on our assault helicopters. Another special weapon was this M79 grenade launcher. It was used to reach out and hit the enemy when he was too far away for our soldier to throw a hand grenade, and yet too close in to call for air support or artillery. Using big shells, it loads like a shotgun. It's very effective and amazingly accurate. The soldiers depend on this quite frequently. And finally, we have the prototype of the M16, which is used in the jungles today. The Springfield Armory is no longer making the nation's military weapons, but with the inventive genius of the weapon developers and the productive capabilities of the armament manufacturers, newer and more effective small arms are being produced all the time.
Among the many new weapons designed to help our Army do its job is this rather small automatic gun. It bears a startling resemblance to the old Gatling gun, and indeed works on much the same principle. The developers of this new weapon call it the Rapid Fire Minigun. Watch this. Almost 200 years have passed since the colonial patriots founded this nation through their armed rejection of British rule. From flintlock muskets to rapid-fire miniguns is a long, long way. But in every step the American soldier has taken in the defense of free men, he has been armed with the finest weapons carried by any fighting man in the world. He has been secure in the knowledge that he would be back in war and in peace with the guns at Springfield.